You think you know The Ring? Well, here's some things you may not have known about the tape that should not be seen.
And it's like somebody's nightmare. Then suddenly, this woman comes on, smiling at you, right? Seeing you through the screen. And as soon as it's over, your phone rings. Someone knows you've watched it. And what they say is, you will die in 7 days.
The Ring is a 2002 film directed by Gore Verbinski. It is a remake of Hideo Nakata's 1998 Ring, also known as Ringu, which itself is an adaptation of a novel of the same name by Koji Suzuki. The Ring is credited with spurring several subsequent remakes of Japanese horror films in the early 2000s, such as The Grudge and Dark Water. Marketing for The Ring was subversive. Commercial spots for the film were used to play the footage from the cursed videotape, usually during late-night programming in the summer of 2002. These commercial spots ran for a full month before any reference was made to the film itself.
Please, I have to stop her. If I don't, my son will die!
Oh yes, he will.
Verbinski originally watched Nakata's Ringu on a very old VHS, which he felt lent itself to the lore of the narrative therein. Quote, "It was really poor quality. But actually that added to the mystique, especially when I realized that it was a movie about a videotape. There's something about that image of a seemingly innocuous videotape, just sitting there unlabeled. If you are aware of the myth, the object itself becomes both tempting and haunting." Similarly, Naomi Watts, The Ring's lead, struggled to find a copy of Ringu while on location in Wales for another project. When she finally obtained a copy, she watched it alone in her hotel room on a very small television. Quote, "I just saw it once, and that was enough to get me excited about doing it."
You don't want to hurt anyone.
But I do. And I'm sorry. It won't stop.
$48 million was the production budget for The Ring. Considering that it grossed $249 million, marks it as one of the highest-grossing horror films of all time. In Japan, it made $8.3 million in its first 2 weeks, more than the $6.6 million Ringu made in total. The Ring was so successful, DreamWorks released the film to 700 additional theaters after its immediate success.
It's going to keep going, isn't it? She'll never stop.
Don't worry, sweetie. You're gonna be okay.
A considerable amount of principal photography was taken care of in Los Angeles and sound stages, though the rest of The Ring was filmed in Washington State. Given the nature of the weather of that region, it was always overcast and bitterly cold, and ultimately lent to the film's overarching feeling of dread. Verbinski and cinematographer Bojan Bazelli played into the natural weak sunlight. Bazelli states, quote, "In lighting the sets and the actors, we tried to eliminate all the shadows cast by the actors, which is meant to subconsciously alter the viewer's sense of perception and add a heightened sense of ambiguity."
See, when you live on an island, you catch a cold. It's everybody's cold.
No offense, ma'am, but what the hell does that mean?
It means ever since that girl's been gone, things have been better.
Production designer Tom Duffield cites painter Andrew Wyeth as a huge inspiration for the colors used in The Ring, stating, quote, "His work has a haunting flavor that I felt would add a mystique to this movie, so I latched onto it. This can be seen in the largely monochromatic sets in the film. The only exception to the film's palette was the red leaf Japanese maple that is a feature of the haunted VHS and becomes a focal point during the film. The tree itself was artificial, constructed entirely out of tubing, plaster, and silk leaves. The production affectionately nicknamed the tree Lucille after Lucille Ball, also a redhead. However, nature itself seemed to not be a fan of the fake tree, as on 2 separate occasions, high winds knocked it over. Duffield remarks on this by saying, quote, "Every time we put it up, the wind would come and blow it over. In Washington, we put it up 3 separate times only to have it knocked down by nearly 100-mile-an-hour wind gusts. We tried it again in Los Angeles when it wasn't windy at all, and that night we had 60-mile-an-hour winds and it blew it down all over again. It was very strange."
Who will show me?
Not now. 4 days.
Apparently one of the toughest challenges in creating the proper atmosphere for the film was the haunted VHS. Verbinski wrestled with making the tape abstract on a first viewing, but grounded in order to connect the images to the events that take place in the film. He also grappled with making the VHS off-putting and bizarre enough to shock its viewers without seeming done purposefully. Quote, I drew on what scared me, my own kind of horrors, and tried to include them in a way that was compelling, but could also make sense from the perspective of the person who made the video.
When you record a tape, the makeup of the tracks is like a signature for whatever did the recording, like a camcorder, VCR, whatever. So the control track could tell us where it came from. But to not have one, I mean, that's like being born without fingerprints.
In order to drive home the cyclical nature of the ring curse without being too heavy-handed, Duffield snuck the motif of the ring everywhere he could. He incorporated it in the wallpaper, carpeting, and clothing. The film's producer, Walter Parks, fawns over the motif, saying, quote, within the context of the movie, it could have a number of different meanings. The ominous image of the eclipse-like ring of light, or perhaps of the circular storyline that leads you back to the beginning. And here's a bonus one. Allegedly in the first week of screenings, theaters in both the United States and Canada put copies of the cursed VHS on seats of theaters playing The Ring. Though confirming this is difficult, but it certainly makes for a spooky urban legend either way. That's it for this episode of You Think You Know Movies. Make sure to subscribe, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and get the latest movie and TV news on ScreenCrush.com.